September 2nd. The command post of the Black Sea Fleet is under attack. Vadim, something exploded. Boom! Bada boom. Explosions at a military training ground in Crimea. An ammunition depot caught fire.
There's an explosion. Do you hear it?
The Ukrainian armed forces have carried out the largest strike on Crimea since the beginning of the war. More than 10 ATACMS and Neptune missiles were launched. Yeah, no fucking way.
I was standing quietly on the old wooden pier.
The Black Sea Fleet was attacked. Strikes targeted air defense bases and airfields in Yevpatoria, the Saki district near Simferopol. 2 S-400 systems, an S-300 and 1 Panzer were damaged.
There was a flyover.
Targets, air defense, airfields, and radar stations. Crimea shook from the explosions. The armed forces of Ukraine are preparing the peninsula for deoccupation. Crimeans are in a panic. Evacuation has begun. We'll discuss all this with Roman Svitan right now.
They successfully hit the main command post of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Ooh.
The command post of the Black Sea Fleet was under attack. There were explosions at the military training ground in Crimea and an ammunition depot caught fire. Moreover, information has emerged that the armed forces of Ukraine struck Crimea. More than 10 Neptune and ATACMS missiles were launched. The strikes targeted air defense bases, the airfield in Yevpatoria, the Saki district, and near Simferopol. According to media reports, 2 S-400 systems, 1 S-300, and 1 Panzer were damaged. Radar stations in the Saki district were also hit, and there was a fire at the military airfield. Moreover, the armed forces of Ukraine attacked a defense plant in Tula twice. The plant halted its operations for 3 days. Let's discuss all of this with the well-known military analyst Roman Svitan. Roman Grigorievich, welcome. Thank you. Wishing everyone good health. Roman Grigorievich, let's start with something positive. These are the strikes on temporarily occupied Crimea. These are attacks on airfields, air defense systems destroyed or damaged, and radar systems as well. What are your thoughts?
Crimea itself is an operational cauldron, squeezed on 2 sides by the seas, the Azov and the Black Sea. It's very difficult to organize an air defense system there. It's just hard to do without ships. If, for example, the Russian Black Sea Fleet could cover Crimea at a certain distance, then yes, the air defense system would be complete. But since we've driven the Russian Black Sea Fleet away, at the very least back to Novorossiysk, Crimea at this point has become vulnerable in terms of air defense. And the Russians will let almost everything through, drones, especially missiles, and especially ballistic ones. That's why our specialists have approached operations in Crimea very skillfully. Most likely it's not Ishpapa, in my opinion, because the strikes are mainly being carried out with Neptunes. Neptune is a coastal missile system that is under the command of our Navy, the naval forces, which are not commanded by Ishpapa. And so using Neptunes specifically against Crimea is the most effective way to accomplish the combat mission. Although if there's nowhere else to use the drones, if you have nowhere else to send them, it's better to send them to Crimea as well, because they're afraid of our drones flying over the sea. They're afraid of drones equipped with anti-aircraft missile systems. We have the Magura V5, which is capable of shooting down Russian helicopters and planes. It has already proven this, those that try to intercept either our missile or our drone. So the question is, if you have something and nowhere to use it, send it to Crimea. Believe me, it will accomplish its combat mission. Why? Because right now in Crimea, no matter where you spit, you'll definitely hit the face of a Russian federal agent who's trying to somehow seize our Crimea. So in this sense, it's the optimal option. Today is a perfect example of this kind of work. The main thing is consistency. The main thing is that it shouldn't be something that happens once a week or once a month. That means we need to strike every day. As soon as we achieve consistency, when every night, every day, a sufficient number of strikes hit Russian military targets in Crimea, believe me, the issue of liberating Crimea will be resolved much faster and more efficiently, so to speak.
Roman Grigorievich, a few days ago, we discussed that the armed forces of Ukraine struck air defense systems in occupied Crimea. But now there is information that, in fact, there were strikes on air defense bases and an airfield in Yevpatoria, the Saki district, and near Simferopol. The command post of the Black Sea Fleet was attacked there. I would like us to pay attention to this as well.
Well, the Saki district is most likely Novofedorivka. There were strikes there. That's exactly where the Russian naval aviation base is located. Naval aviation, it's like they're sailors, but pilots are pilots, the ones who walk around with daggers. Well, something like that, naval aviation. So right near Saki, in Novofedorivka, there is both an airfield and a base, and there's a storage facility for explosives of various types, as well as missiles and aerial bombs. In other words, everything is there. The command and control system is there too. Right there in Saki, the communications control system for almost the entire southern and Zaporizhzhia fronts is located there in Saki. So there are definitely targets there worth striking. That's why it was hit, of course. And naturally, Simferopol as well. On the so-called airfield grounds, there's an airfield near Simferopol where anti-aircraft missile systems and radar stations of the Russian radio technical troops are located. In other words, there are valid targets to strike, especially since they use the Simferopol airfield as a transit warehouse. They unload and load ammunition there, and the strike was successful. So there was a good detonation there. They took out the airfield technical equipment both near Saki and near Simferopol.
Please explain to our esteemed audience watching us what is the command post of the Black Sea Fleet and how serious are attacks on it?
Well, there is a command post and there is an alternate command post. So this strike was specifically on the main base command post. But to be honest, it's unlikely that anyone is actually there at the moment. Well, considering that it's stationary, everyone knows about it. And naturally, no one is there now, just like no one is present, for example, in our own regional administrations, city administrations, or in the management systems of the security service or the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Well, there's simply no one anywhere. In administrative buildings, since everyone knows their location, something is bound to hit them. It's exactly the same situation at this command post. The only thing you can still get to there are the communication systems, which are still present, like the server rooms. So those can also be taken out. So most likely the goal was, well, naturally to scare the duty officers and orderlies, so they'd be freaking out and calling the commander saying they've been hit again. That's all it is, just that. And there's also an important point here. It's all about the information angle. Like they struck the Black Sea Fleet's command post. Did someone need that? No, no one did. But whatever, they went ahead and hit it anyway. It does sound impressive after all. That's pretty much how you should look at it right now.
Roman Grigorievich, so if we sum it up, there are dozens of Neptune missiles, air defense targets, airfields, radars, 2 S-400s, an S-300, and a Panzer destroyed and fires at the airfield in Saki. About the S-400, S-300, and Panzer. How significant are these victories for us, and how many more such air defense systems are there in temporarily occupied Crimea?
Well, there are up to 100 of them, all kinds of systems of this level, up to 100. So even the destruction of just one is quite a significant loss for the Russians. And this is the beginning, you know, as we've been discussing for several years now, the beginning of gaining air superiority. It feels like we keep starting but can't seem to finish. Well, it's a big problem. Maybe they should just go see a urologist after all. Our guys will think it over and somehow resolve this issue. But if we've already started, then let's finish it, see it through to the end. I mean, they're starting off, right? How many times has this happened already? They start destroying Russian air defense systems and then abandon it at some stage when they should have kept going in order to clear out all of Crimea and start using aviation. And that's what's happening now too. So in terms of how the information is presented, I would, of course, like this beginning to finally lead to the destruction of Russian air defenses in Crimea. But now I'll be more cautious because I don't know whether our superiors have gone to the gynecologist or not.
Roman Grigorievich, when we discuss the bridges in temporarily occupied Crimea, you always say that the Kerch Bridge is not the most important one that needs to be destroyed. A number of other bridges, including some specific ones, need to be destroyed or at least severely damaged. Let's discuss this.
Well, first, how many bridges are there in Crimea? In reality, there are about 10, give or take. The same Kerch Bridge, it's not just a single bridge. There are at least 2 highway lanes and 1 railway line. Plus, there's also an energy bridge there, meaning electricity is transferred from Taman to Crimea. There's also a fuel bridge with a so-called product pipeline running through it, pumping diesel into Crimea. There's also a water bridge there, pumping water as well, just so everyone understands. So that's already at least several bridges. Next to it is the ferry bridge, meaning, well, as a bridge, it's actually a system of connections with Crimea, ferries shuttling between the docks on the left and right banks of the Kerch Strait. So that's the main thing if we're looking specifically at the Kerch direction. Plus, there's the so-called Sea Bridge. These are, of course, Russian ships, mainly ships, the same large landing ships. They can be used as ferries, carrying up to 500,000 tons at a time. So they can transport a lot of things. In addition to that, naturally, there are escort vessels. So this is the sea bridge that needs to be sunk. There is also the air bridge, of course, mainly Il-76, the 12th series, and 12's Il-76, which can also transport quite a large amount of cargo. And now, of course, there's also the land corridor. So now there's a railway from Rostov almost all the way through the Mius Bay, through the Kalmius, and basically the railroad goes nearly to Melitopol. There's also a highway, of course, a 4-lane road. They've already built it from Donetsk to Jankoy, and you can basically get from Rostov to Jankoy on a proper road. That's why there are currently a lot of bridges that still need a lot of work. But of course, you have to start with the Kerch Bridge again. Start with it for what purpose? So that it's finished properly. They won't be sent to the urologist anymore. I don't even know what to do with them, where to send them. They should be sent to the gynecologist.
Roman Grigorievich, you always say that the two most protected objects by air defense and missile defense are, in occupied Crimea, the Kerch Bridge, and the capital of Mordor, Moscow. Accordingly, it is necessary to carry out a certain special operation, like we did with Spiderweb, so that we can inflict maximum damage on the Kerch Bridge.
Well, that's not the case now. It's different now. The thing is, both the Kerch Bridge and Moscow are protected by air defense systems that defend themselves. That is, the long-range systems are protected by medium-range ones. The medium-range are protected by short-range, and the short-range are protected by the same mobile groups and anti-aircraft guns. So the air defense density there is quite powerful. And at the moment, it can only be breached in one way, either with some kind of creative approach, like we saw when the security service pulled it off 3 times, right? But that's creativity, and it sometimes takes months or even years to prepare for that. So it takes a long time. The optimal way to break through air defense is with ballistic missiles. Look at Israel's air defense. Its density is just as high, if not even stronger, than Moscow's or Kerch's. But even the Iranian ballistic missiles, which are basically cobbled together, so to speak, still manage to get through. Why is that? Because some of the ballistic missiles will inevitably get through. You can never shoot down all of them. You can shoot down all the drones, definitely. You can even shoot down all the cruise missiles, aerial targets, and all the planes if the density is high enough. But ballistic missiles, especially so-called quasi-ballistic ones, are a different story. That's when a ballistic missile follows a so-called weaving trajectory, making it very difficult to calculate the interception point. In that case, you can use all your anti-missile systems and still miss the ballistic missile. That's how it is with the Kerch Bridge.
We need ballistic missiles. As soon as we have ballistic missiles, we need to send them to the Kerch Bridge and to Moscow. No matter how well they are protected, they'll let them through. Roman Grigorievich, so we always talk about Novorossiysk, and now, as I read all the military analysts, they write that the Russian Federation has started to bring missile carriers into the Black Sea much more frequently. And they use all of this for massive missile strikes on Ukrainian territory on a regular basis. How can Ukraine inflict the maximum possible damage on the Black Sea fleet, which, as I understand it, is now hiding in Novorossiysk, so that the missile carriers don't go out into the Black Sea and terrorize, if you'll pardon me, our beloved country?
Well, what would I do, for example? I would immediately arrest all those figures who ensured the safety of A, Russian hydrocarbons, were not striking Russian oil refineries, and B, the Russian Black Sea fleet. They were the ones who provided them with security. As for entering or sailing, because the Russian fleet floats, and that's intentional for those who understand me, normal fleets sail, but the Russian fleet floats. So the Russian fleet's ability to float has been ensured, and security in the eastern part of the Black Sea has been provided by our green activists, who set this up 3 months ago with the Saudis, offering this interesting security arrangement. And what is the Russian Black Sea Fleet doing? They're feeling quite comfortable near Novorossiysk. If they need to fire off caliber missiles, they go out to sea, launch them, and then return back. Why? Because the security of the Russian Black Sea Fleet's operations and presence in the eastern part of the Black Sea has been ensured. But what really needs to be done? They need to be destroyed, that's all. The only issue is with these obligations. I wonder who exactly they made these commitments to, not to strike the Black Sea Fleet and not to destroy Russian oil refineries. Certainly not to the Russians, believe me. Why? The Russians had no problem burning down our Kremenchuk refinery, finishing it off completely, in fact. Recently, we saw what happened in Poltava, in the Poltava region. The Kremenchuk oil refinery was completely wiped out. So that means their agreements aren't with the Russians. With whom then? In other words, who did our leadership make commitments to not to destroy the Russian fleet in Novorossiysk and not to destroy Russian oil refineries? Is it with aliens or something? So who is it with then? So if the Russians don't know about this, that's a very interesting question, because you could also strike, only this time, the Black Sea Fleet.
Roman Grigorievich, I'd like to share with you the latest information regarding the oil refinery. There were explosions in Voronezh, Russia on June 20th. Russians report drone attack on oil refinery. Drones attacked an oil refinery in the left bank district of the city. Local residents report a huge number of explosions. The governor naturally confirmed the attack. Please, let's hit the refinery. Please, Voronezh.
If we had actually hit it right now, we wouldn't just be talking about striking the refinery and some explosions happening somewhere. We would be showing you a burning oil refinery right now. Why aren't we showing it to you? A burning refinery, because no one hit it. If it had been hit, believe me, it would have already burned down. So that means something just flew by nearby, as they say. They made some noise but didn't accomplish anything. Or even worse, in the 3 months given to the Russians to secure the refinery, they managed to do it. And those few drones that flew somewhere past, let's say, Voronezh, were simply shot down by the air defense system of the Voronezh refinery or wherever they were flying. Or what did the Russians do during those 3 months? They weren't just picking their noses like ours or chewing on green snot. They basically covered all the oil refineries with aramid and Kevlar nets. I won't explain. Look up what an aramid Kevlar net is on Wikipedia. That is at least the thread from which these nets are woven. Now the refineries are covered. Just try getting a drone in there. Now every refinery is covered with this kind of net. It's protected from drones. You can't break through it anymore. Now you need a missile to get through, and even then a tandem one. I don't even know what kind. We need to look at how to burn through these nets first, what mechanisms to use, and so on and so forth. We're not striking the refineries. And why aren't we striking them? I'll say it again. Our green government has ensured the safety of Russian oil refining, has provided them with security. Now, with the Israelis stirring things up in the Middle East, the price of oil has gone up, and now the Russians are raking in petrodollars by the shovelful. Well, maybe some of that, of course, a little stream of a few $billions is flowing somewhere to Bankova Street, I don't know, but most likely, because otherwise there's simply no explanation for why we haven't destroyed Russian oil refining for 3 months.
The Ukrainian armed forces have attacked a defense plant in Tula twice in the last 3 days, but the facility has resumed operations. According to sources from Astrakhan in the region's emergency services, on June 18th, drones attacked, and then again with a second attack occurring on the night of June 20th. A fire broke out, covering an area of 400 square meters. The plant's operations have been halted. So just how serious was the damage? We attacked the defense plant in Tula. Roman Grigorievich, the floor is yours.
Let's talk about the realities. Any defense plant, when it's built, is constructed with protection against a nuclear explosion. I mean, what kind of fool would build a defense plant or military facility if it wasn't protected against an attack? Moreover, they're protected with reinforced concrete with serious underground levels. So in reality, all that drones can do is burn down an oil refinery. Just try to break into one of those now. But as for a military plant, you won't seriously put it out of commission. Sure, you can do some damage from above, maybe grind something down, knock out some electrical systems, or take out some incoming power substations, for example. But for how long would that last? Well, just for a couple of days until they bring in new transformers and get the military plant running again. So I wouldn't say that we've stopped it or even suspended it. If you hit the same spot every day, eventually they'll find a way to intercept it and you won't be able to hit there anymore. Real military factories can only be destroyed with missiles, either ballistic or cruise missiles. And drones, where should drones actually be used? Either to Crimea or to the oil refineries. There is no third option. Where to go? To scare Muscovites. By the way, you can also take a mechanism and scare Muscovites. It's just a bit expensive. They knocked back 100 grams there and they were swollen to the point of exhaustion. And we're just losing drones that could have burned down oil refineries and terrorized military targets in Crimea. Why in Crimea? Should drones be used in Crimea? Because they can't be afraid right now. Russian air defense is afraid to fly over the Black Sea because our Magura V5s go in there. We've talked about this many times with missiles from the AR-73 and M9 air defense systems, both our old Soviet ones and the new American ones.
Yes, Roman Grigorievich, that's an important topic. But before that, friends, please like this video. In the comments, write a few kind words in support of Ukraine and also let us know where you're watching from. Roman Grigorievich and I work 3 times a week on my YouTube channel Dar Shastlivaya for an audience all over the world so that people know the truth about Russian aggression and Russia's war against Ukraine. That's why every like, every comment, and every subscription from you is priceless. Thank you so much. Let's move on. Roman Grigorievich, so soon Russia will be launching 800 drones, not just 300 or 400 per night. The new drones are now harder to shoot down. Russians have increased production by 5 to 7 times, according to communications expert Flash. The enemy has stockpiled Shaheds, or drones as you call them, and can now carry out a massive strike. Military expert Kovalenko notes that Kyiv remains in a high threat zone. Raids may be carried out as ammunition is accumulated at intervals of 3 to 4 days a week. But I think, nevertheless, that a more systematic approach was chosen for the capital over a longer period. Roman Grigorievich, the floor is yours.
It's not just me saying this anymore. These aren't Shaheds, they're Russian Chinese. Some foreign tabloids are already starting to say that Russian drones mean Chinese involvement in our war. Chinese. Yes, the assembly is done in small batches at Russian factories, but the parts, components, and assemblies are mostly Chinese. Some are Russian. It's the world, it's progress. We've said this many times already. So this is confirmation of what we've been saying for years now, that China is involved against us. Iran has long since faded into the background. It's neither heard nor seen anymore. It's China specifically, and we need to pay attention to China. That is the number of drones that the Russians are now assembling with the help of the Chinese, since the components and assemblies are produced at their factories, really does exceed hundreds per day. How can they use, say, 700 or 800 at once? Well, for now, I wouldn't mention such numbers yet. The thing is, producing a drone and actually using it are 2 completely different things. You can produce 1,000 drones, but just try launching them all. Target designation, routing, flight control, certain checks, and, for example, breaching our air defenses. So it's an entire process. Well, 700, 800, they can barely use 100, 150 effectively. That is to actually accomplish some task, and even then, only with great difficulty. So you could say that it's possible to produce together with the Chinese something that could be used, say 700 or 800, but that's unlikely. But in any case, we already need to understand that the Russians can produce 150, 200 per day. That's already a lot, and we need to restructure our air defense system to overhaul it completely. We now need to create a frontal air defense system that could cover the entire front line, about 2,000 kilometers, including the Black Sea coast as well, roughly from Odessa to Belarus. That's about 2,000 kilometers to a depth of 50 kilometers to block the passage of any drones, both kamikaze drones and other types. So this is a kind of frontal air defense system that should be, well, ideally part of, say, a course. Right now, we are forming these cores. According to calculations, each course should be able to cover a 50 by 50 kilometer square. So within each course, there should be air defense brigades that would prevent Russian drones from getting through. And then it doesn't matter how many there are. 700, 800, 1,800, 7,000, it doesn't matter. In other words, the frontal air defense should shoot down all the drones trying to enter our territory, and whatever gets through should be taken out by surface-to-air missile systems inside the country and by aviation.
Roman Grigorievich, let's move on to an important topic, the summer advance of Russia's enemy. So during the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, Putin made a statement, and Peskov did as well. We, Russia, are advancing deeper into Ukraine and will continue to do so. That's a quote. Peskov stated that Russia does not need a ceasefire since it has the advantage on the front. And Putin added that they, the Russians, have a strategic advantage on the front. That was a quote from the Russian dictators. The floor is yours.
Well, I agree that they have an advantage on the front. The Russians do have an advantage, but a strategic advantage, definitely not. They absolutely do not have any strategic initiative anywhere. In other words, to use that now cliche phrase, not at all, right? Nowhere on no section of the front do they have strategic initiative. That's why the Russians do not have a strategic advantage. We have a geographical strategic advantage for one simple reason. They are attacking us in a semicircle, and we are defending ourselves from within that semicircle. So we have this kind of strategic advantage, at the very least a geographical one, and some of the Russian idiots are now pinned against the Azov coast along a front about 500 kilometers wide and 80 kilometers deep. Just try to hold them there. In other words, the Russians have crawled into a pocket on the front, surrounded it. This is what they call capturing the Sea of Azov. First, Valuev bought it out, and then the Russian army captured it. So this so-called capture of the Sea of Azov has actually led to the Russians completely losing their strategic advantage. That's why Putin, well, must have lost his mind, probably. But Peskov, he said that right now the Russians do indeed have an advantage in manpower, equipment, and so on and so forth. But it's not enough to accomplish combat missions along the entire front line or to achieve operational and tactical objectives. There is an advantage, but I want to emphasize again, it's not sufficient. Why is it not sufficient? Because the out of his mind Putin burned through part of the reserves, over a third of Russia's reserves that had been stockpiled for the summer military campaign of 2025 before May 9th. So with Putin, well, things just didn't work out for the Russian army. They just weren't lucky with their supreme commander-in-chief.
Roman Grigorievich, to sum up, Deep State criticized the defensive preparations in the Sumy region. Today, this has spread across all Telegram channels, all the media have shared it. So Deep State writes that in the Sumy region, dragon's teeth are lying around in piles and no one has actually installed them. Although, as the military say, there was plenty of time to install them. Essentially, this is just a gift for the Russians who will later use these fortifications against us, Ukraine. While Russia's offensive in the Sumy region continues, the situation with fortifications is dire. Defense Minister Umerov did not want to come to the Rada today and explain how this happened. This was written by Deep State. Roman Grigorievich, the floor is yours.
Well, why call Umerov to the Rada? Why didn't he come? He doesn't even know what fortification is. Really, how would Umerov know what fortification is? Just because he's the Minister of Defense doesn't mean he knows anything about fortifications. He doesn't have any basic military education. He might know anything else, but not about fortifications. What's the point? What's the point of asking him anything, and what's the point of him even coming? He did the right thing by not coming. Otherwise, it would just be embarrassing. You should be asking the person who appointed him. So ask the one who appointed him. What kind of idiot thought it was a good idea to make Umerov the Minister of Defense? That's the real problem. Now, regarding the issue of fortifications, well, I completely disagree. Just because dragon's teeth are lying around somewhere doesn't mean we don't have fortifications. It only means that somewhere there are dragon's teeth lying around for which Ukrainian taxpayers' money was spent. But that doesn't mean at all that we lack fortifications. These are two completely different things. In other words, we need to find out whose teeth those are, which dragon they belong to. At the very least, find that dragon and cut something off so it becomes a dragoness. But that's a different issue. That's a question for our law enforcement agencies.
Roman Grigorievich, what is the situation in the Sumy region? This is very important.
The same as in Kharkov, Volchansk, and Lipsy. That is, the Russians have come up against a certain defense system, and we are now holding them there. It will happen the same way. Like for a year now, we have been talking about Volchansk. Where are the Russians? In Volchansk. And where are the Russians today? In Volchansk. And where will they be tomorrow? Yes, in Volchansk. It's exactly the same situation here. Where they were near Yunakovka yesterday, they are there today, and tomorrow they'll be somewhere near Yunakovka as well. Just like with Volchansk and Lipsy, that's precisely how we'll discuss a significant part of this particular bridgehead, nothing more than that.
Yes, I just read that a military public page published photos of construction materials in the Yunakovka area, right near the border with Russia. They're also discussing that, according to Deep State, there are some questions regarding the fortifications. Dear audience, please like this video. In the comments, write a few kind words in support of Ukraine and also let us know where you're watching from. Once again, let us know where you're watching from and whether you agree with the overall situation. What do you think? This is very important. I read every single one of your comments. And of course, please support us with a like and a subscription, because the more likes, subscriptions, and comments we get, the more people will see this video. Roman Grigorievich and I go live on my YouTube channel 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Roman Grigorievich, thank you. And as always, we will see you again next week and beyond.
Goodbye.